briefly go over what a deload is and why you do it. There's some common misconceptions, and I'm just going to run through basic outlines of it real quick. So what it is a volume and an intensity reduction for a week in duration at the end of a long period or a tough period of training. So what does that mean? So if you were doing back squats and you were doing, say, 4 sets of 10, the following week, the volume reduction is about 70% would be 3 sets of 8 to 10. As far as intensity, if you're doing, say, 400 pounds for reps, 70% of that, your working sets would be approximately 315 or so. The point of this is to manage fatigue. When you're training really, really hard, you accumulate fatigue within your body. You start to feel run down, you start to feel beat up, and a lot of times it can mask how truly strong you really are. That's why at the end of a long training cycle for whatever sport you're training for, there's a taper or a peak to kind of reduce that fatigue, and you can really show how truly fit you are for sport competition. Hypertrophy training versus strength training. So in training for hypertrophy, the goal is putting on muscle mass. You're training at a lower intensity, less weight on the bar, but substantially higher repetitions. Usually you can go a longer period of time while training for hypertrophy before feeling the need to actually deload. Whereas when you're strength training, where you may be training in that 3 to 5 rep range or even lower than that, and the weight is very, very hot, very, very heavy, maybe 85+% of your 1 rep max, you're gonna have to deload every 4th week or so. So a common program would be like 5-3-1, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, and then you go 5-3-1, and that 4th week is a deload. You drop fatigue so that the next block of training that you do, you are fresh and you're able to really lift as much weight as you possibly can. There are some differences depending on where you're at. So say an elite level lifter, someone that's really, really, really strong versus say a novice level lifter, someone that's maybe a high school kid, someone that isn't very strong. They may be able to go a much longer duration without having to deload, because realistically doing 225 squat for reps is not nearly as taxing on the body as say squatting 500 to 600 pounds for reps. To go along with that, you have to look at how many days a week you're training. If you're training 2, maybe 3 days a week, you probably don't need to deload nearly as frequently, or you may not have to really at all, and compare it to say training 5, 6, 7 days a week where you're really beating yourself up. Common misconceptions for deloads would be that it is a recovery week, but that it's an off week. You hear things thrown around like if you deload every 4th or 5th week, it's like taking 25% of the year off. That's a little ridiculous, right? Doing 70% of the volume and intensity is not the same as doing literally nothing, doing 0% of each. So again, the point of it is to drop and manage the fatigue you accumulate from really, really hard training. You should feel really beat up when you start your deload. By the end of it, you should start feeling really fresh and ready to attack the next phase of your training. Hopefully this clears up some misconceptions. It gives you a basic understanding of why you're doing it. It's really useful, but again, you should feel like you need to use one in order to it really be useful.